So, on my journey to Riot's headquarters, I had a chance to talk to some of Riot's teams. And of course, one of those teams was Riot's MMO team. And while it was really awesome to talk to them, luckily we even had some time to do an interview. Unfortunately, the interview was recorded in one of their meeting rooms, which meant that it was very echoey. I mean,
Can we just go one by one to introduce yourselves in your position?
Sure. I'm VJ Tucker. I'm the EP of the MMO.
Fortunately, however, the world does have the technology to salvage the audio, and so the final result should be totally fine. Just know that it is not a studio quality. It is literally my laptop and a USB microphone in a square room. And of course, since it is hard to get some info on Riot's MMO, I tried to push them with the questions a little bit, just to see what we can learn. But I knew they wouldn't be able to talk about any specifics. So my questions had to be as broad as possible, but even so, I was still trying to walk on the edge. Sometimes you'll see the devs laughing about the fact that I am very close to the line, and 3 times it actually happened. I asked a question which had to be cut out, but the follow-up conversations were fine. So be ready for the fact that sometimes there will be some edits and cuts and it will break the pacing. But ultimately, I am pretty happy with what I was able to put together. And honestly, I had an absolute blast talking to these guys.
Can you just go one by one to introduce yourselves in your position?
Sure. I'm VJ Tucker. I'm the EP of the MMO.
I'm Mark Yender. I'm the game design director for the project.
Greg Fallis, art director.
And I'm Ant Berners-Ladai. I'm a writer. So, I might have made an oopsie. Strong start. I released the video. Kinda started an avalanche of hype out of nowhere. How did you guys take this? Was there how much damage have I caused on accident?
Not even close. We thought it was awesome. We immediately shared it among the team. We watch it for inspiration as a reminder of what player hype is for the space. More than anything, you raised the bar for us, which is awesome.
We love it, but we started to sweat a bit.
So up until that point, were you in a safe space where you were kind of fine because people knew it was happening, but no one really took it seriously. Have you actually taken any of the feedback you got so far into consideration? I don't know how many people really gave feedback. I mean, people did give feedback on the ML. Did you take something into consideration already?
Yeah, we always have. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do is listen to our players along the way and figure out when we should respond and integrate it in and when we shouldn't.
Right.
That's the hard part of our jobs. But definitely ignoring the feedback is us failing.
So I mean, talking factions, races, stuff like that, because you probably have to have an idea and stick to it, but then you hear different opinions from other people. Is it something that you also take into consideration, even though it might go against your basic idea? Roll it, these answer.
Here you go. You hear, every potential player wants something, and there's, hopefully millions of them, and everyone wants something different. And so it's impossible for us to give every person what they want. But, really often there's a lot of similar themes, right? And when we reduce it to the sort of core of what is the fantasy that people are looking for? What is the experience? We can then, take that and say, what's the best version of that we can deliver? And even better, we're not just going to give people what they say they want. We're going to try and figure out how we can over-deliver. How can we give them something that blows their minds that is also, oh my God, that's exactly what I wanted. That's the dream.
It's super important. Not just giving people what they expect or, just going, you got that. And this as well. And this. That's really important.
That's the soul of what we're trying to do is ultimately we're in service of trying to realize the dreams of our players, but that's not always exactly what they're asking for. Sometimes it is about extracting the essence. It's what is the magic that you're seeing that we haven't seen yet? And how do we create it? And ultimately, I personally think that's Riot's superpower, especially with League. We see it with Valorant. We see it with our games, how we respond to players. And the one thing we definitely can't do is dunk our head in the sand until we're shit.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get a little taste of that with,
Yeah. Which, by the way, I saw some things. I'm kidding. Literally, if I turn the camera a few inches, I'm gonna get nuked.
Don't do it.
So, one thing that's a big topic that I don't know if you can answer is, the big old talk about like factions and races, more specifically like separating the player base, because there are some MMOs who give you the freedom of like, you can play with anyone, you can, there are no barriers. And then there are others who actually like split the community very specifically into like, maybe two parts that are battling. What's your like very vague general idea without confirming anything on like this kind of philosophy?
Yeah.
So there's this perfect saying I saw in one of the, a developer doc from one of the Zelda developers, which is, you can't just deliver exactly perfect realism or whatever. You're trying to shape something that feels real, feels believable, but is like actually making the thing you want. Right. And so like there are things that we want. We don't want, me and my best friend, we don't want people not to be able to play with each other. Obviously, that's like a bad, that's a problem. But we also want to, maybe capture the spirit and the kind of, one of the iconic elements of the League of Legends IP, where you've got this complex, factions, and there's, there's a lot of shades of gray, and there's a lot of interesting conflict, and there's a lot of, kind of ways that you or someone else might relate to different elements of it. And so we just try and take all of those factors, the things we want, the things that we want to be true in the experience or in the thematic or in the IP, and find a combination of them that works.
You want all those things that people love about our world, like the conflicts that are already there and the rivalries and stuff. You want to play that through. You want to see that.
But you also don't want to like lock people into like one side, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really our job.
Not confirming anything.
That's a perfect example, because there's we talk about 100 of these problems every day, right? There's just always so many things. There's always trade-offs, but it's like you just try to take the pieces together, find a way to make it work, and when we do it well, you see the result, and you're like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm getting what I want, and and the game is good, and it's fun to play, or something like that.
The general talk is always about when classic WoW came out. That one ignited the passion for the very old school MMOs.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting how when classic WoW came out, it once again became the king of MMOs, and everyone suddenly realized that all the innovations that came from the other MMOs weren't really enough to maybe give the MMO genre actually more value.
Yeah.
So what I got from this general idea, is you're trying to make a mix of staying true to the core idea of MMOs while iterating in some ways.
I think it's really important that we look at what is working in the market, and then also evolve the expectations to see where we're going. And if you look at where WoW started, classic MMO, I think all of us played many, many, many hours of classic WoW. And then you look at how the genre evolved over the course of post-classic WoW era, they were all chasing WoW. And so they're all looking at one specific thing and trying to make a better version of that thing. And now what we're trying to do is we're trying to say okay, what went right during that period, and what has changed in the games industry and our players' expectations up until that point, and look at both of those lenses and craft something that feels like it's the right evolution of it. So I think ultimately many people in the industry are seeing similar things, and so we're actually hoping that we can learn from some of the other games that launch in the meantime. But we do think it's going to have some changes and evolutions to that formula without completely throwing it out just for the sake of it.
Just personal take. I actually love the idea that the game has dedicated servers, because one thing that happened in WoW later on is at the moment they gave us random matchmaking and stuff like that. That was a breaking point where if you are an asshole on a server, it didn't matter really. There were never nothing really happened to you. But if you are on a dedicated server and you behave badly, people know it about you, and it kind of forms a really cool community. But it's kind of interesting that these days I don't think there is a single MMO that actually has this whole structure.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Mark nailed it early on when we were talking about trade-offs. Is ultimately, you can build games in different approaches, but they have really different trade-offs about that sense of identity and the sense of community that gets created. But then when you start to commoditize human interactions, and you're the same as any other bot that's walking by me, then you lose a lot of that. Megaserver also has some risk-on approaches. We actually have an engineer that worked on Guild Wars 2 and designed a lot of the Megaserver work. It has some of the flaws and risks in that space. And the one thing that we definitely don't want to do is try and solve these solutions for absolutely everybody. We do want to have opinionated takes that have some trade-offs, but a lot of that essence of community and people feeling important and actually having these interactions matter with other people, those are values that we're excited to chase.
Now, I'm not gonna go into like races and classes. I think that's a very much dead end that we can't really talk about. But when it comes to the world, you probably did take into consideration the scale of the world and like how you're gonna approach it. Are you leaning more towards like segmenting the world and kind of like play the safe route where you have a lot of open spaces, or are you ready to like round up like a piece of the content and like ship it in its entirety? Is that even a question you can talk about at all? What's your approach to like, you know, the world at launch?
Ultimately, one of the most important things for us is to realize the world of Runeterra that exists in our players' hearts. We are those people. Like we want to be in the world and we want to see it and we want to experience it. The path for this MMO in the long term will have that full world of Runeterra realized. So for us, it's just a question of how we get there, what the steps are, whether we start small, whether we start broad. We have some takes about where we want to go, but we have our North Star of like that full version of Runeterra, and we know we're going to get there. So it's just a question of the steps along the way.
I have two more questions. One is, when it comes to Riot, they always have like a very specific, almost specific artistic style, where it's like very stylized, very cartoony, but not exactly cartoony. Is it something that you want to stick to in general? Do like very style rather than realistic? Is like the classic stylized style on the table for the MMO?
Hopefully I can say it's Jesus.
I don't know what you're gonna say.
So we will be familiar, but something unique.
All right.
It works. This is a place where it's a big damn shame that you can't see the stuff that he's working on, because it's so good.
Last question that I think we can talk about is how did this project start? Because usually at Riot, all the big things start as passion projects, be it, you know, Game Modes on League, EFT, really, you know, Legends of Runeterra. Well, it's all like passion projects. How did the MMO project even like start?
I think the fairest way to say it is that massive parts of this company have been dreaming of making this game for our players for a long time. Obviously, Meryl trolled the world by asking whether an MMO should exist. The reason I came to Riot 7 years ago was to make an MMO. I would say different versions of like this space, what we've been thinking about and moving it forward, have existed in all of our hearts for a very long time. And eventually, I know. And honestly, eventually we just all started to get a bunch of those people together. We're like, now is the time. We've got to go make that investment. And obviously, I can't tell you any dates or people, but it's been something that I think all of us have been chasing for a really long time.
And players have just been asking for it for such a long time. It's just like, gotta listen to that.
Yeah, we're
obviously the magic when it's just like MMO win.
Yeah. One of the things I really do appreciate, though, like transparently speaking, is that the thing that we know about Riot, like one of the top line values, is we're not going to ship something that's perfectly fine. And so it took us a little while to get to the point where we're willing to start the project, but it was waiting until we're like, okay, now we have enough with the work on lore. We have enough in terms of the right people that is like, now is the time to finally make this and do it right. That was the thing that held off, is that we're like, company wasn't at the right place, the people weren't at the right place, the IP wasn't at the right place. Once we get all of those, Meryl's like, we need to do this thing. The thing that is most important to us really is that we make something that is exceptional, that is worthy of our players and the dreams that they have, and that it's okay that it takes a while.
Right.
That's the biggest risk, is that we're like, hey, we're doing this thing, and people are like, it's been 6 months, why haven't you shipped the thing yet? And it's like, well, I don't know. We're in service of all of you. We're in service of trying to make the best thing for you, and sometimes a little fire under our asses to get it out the door isn't a bad thing.
No pressure, but the Riot MMO right now is probably the most anticipated one in the market right now.
No pressure.
Pressure. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we've got the people who are at least gonna rise to the challenge and fucking fight that fight.
I mean, you all said many times that the team is really stacked.
Yeah.
Like you probably have veterans. Like I don't know what teams you really like. All of you were though. I assume it was a lot.
It's incredible.
It's really where are you guys?
Can you actually like say? All of you, like what
Actually, you worked on?
Yeah.
Let's see. What are you? Star Wars Galaxies, an unannounced MMO inside of Ensemble, Age of Empires 3, Halo Wars, Orcs Must Die, Hero Academy, Words with Friends. an unannounced MMO prototype inside of Riot a long time ago, Wild Rift, and then now this.
Obviously, I'm not this bad, but like, I mean, I worked on. Yeah, no kidding.
That's time for flex, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Let him flex. Like, it's good. I mean, I worked on League of Legends for like almost a decade. I worked on Call of Duty before that, and a bunch of, smaller, kind of AA games for a while before that.
But it can't be understated how important it is to have people who like know everything about the history of our players and the IP. Yeah. Like, that's massive. In many ways, more important than like a bunch of different games.
Yeah. So God, many years, many different things.
It's so many.
Legends of Runeterra. Let's see. Sims. I've worked on Sims for many years. Some other MMOs. Some old ones, like one that eventually got out, Gods and Heroes, back in the day. And yeah, like a number of small projects.
Right. Yeah. And most of my stuff before here, I've been here for 9 years. I was working freelance for quite a lot of years, writing books and doing things like that, doing some world building here and there for different games. And then most of my background before that comes from like tabletop. So like I worked at Games Workshop, so I was a games designer and a writer and an art manager over there and working on like Warhammer 40k, that kind of stuff. That was my sort of kickstart into the industry, really.
One of the things that I love most about this team, other than the fact that they're huge dreamers and like have massive ambitions, is that everybody has had their story in the games industry, which means nobody has the chip on their shoulder. Right? Everybody is like, whatever is the right thing to do for the game, whatever is the right thing to do for players. There's not conversations about ego or identity or my idea or your idea. It's just like, how do we make the best thing? Right. And that is the most refreshing thing I've ever experienced on a game team. I'm surrounded by people smarter than me, and that's just like the best.
So cool. Which is good, because this challenge is huge.
Oh yeah. You can't get, you honestly can't go bigger than MMO.
Yeah.
Like that's actually just the biggest genre.
Yeah.
You can probably tackle.
And so we put on like one of the IPs that has the most expectations.
Oh yeah.
Well, like no pressure.
It's literally the Harvest Travel.
It really is.
Let's go.
All right.
Well, that was a really awesome interview where we did actually get some answers. We had
It's trying not to get fired.
more than I expected, so I really do appreciate all of you. And I'm gonna do some funny editing, and I'm just gonna cut it off so you can just say goodbye.
Bye.